just some of the 5 big takeaways from our learning over the course of the last few years and the work that we're doing and our COVID response work. So 5 things for us all to consider in our grant making to be more effective and impactful in advancing racial equity as a part of what you may be trying to achieve. So these 5 things that we at the Community Foundation are thinking about and attempting to build into our discretionary grant making, but it's also relevant, I think, for all of our fund holders and donors to consider in your own journey to include or focus in this work. So I'm going to dig in. So the first is seek out organizations that are rooted in community, are marginalized communities, and those that are accountable to their community. These are the organizations with greater understanding of needs and those most proximate to community challenges, but also we find the most equipped with solutions on how to change the systems in those communities. So seek out organizations that are rooted in communities with the greatest need. That, I think, is the first consideration. The second is engage with leadership that reflects the communities they serve. I've learned throughout COVID and with our grantee partners the power of this. Oftentimes the level of, trust, I guess, goes deeper with these leaders. People in the community trust people who have the same lived experiences as them, the understanding of their needs. And so they may share with those that they serve. It is really an important connection to being effective organizations that deliver important services. The third is unrestricted operating support is what all organizations need, but especially those addressing big, bold challenges with a systems change approach. So I remember during COVID talking with nonprofits about funding food security. And our interest in giving them a grant was to pay for food costs. That's what we thought that was needed, right? We had all this great demand and we needed more food. And we did, by the way. But the nonprofit came back and said, well, we actually don't need your resources for the actual food because there was state funding and there was additional supports coming in. What we actually need is we have a big challenge where we can't pay for the amount of gas that's needed to get our food trucks from the Greater Boston Food Bank to our site. And then we run mobile markets, and all of those vehicles require gas. And if anybody remembers, at the same time that this was happening, we were paying $5 a gallon for gas. And so that was an aha moment for me that said, we need to shift our thinking of restricted funding on what we think is needed to unrestricted funding that entrusts the nonprofit who's best equipped to know what it is that funding can be used for in the most impactful way. So I share that because I remember getting off the phone and being very humbled going, I felt like I just got schooled and wow, it took this long for me to kind of connect those dots that communities that do this work every day have the greatest solutions and understand what those needs are. So we ask you to think about the grantees as partners in the work and making sure that we treat them as those trusted partners. Doesn't mean that accountability isn't there because we have continued conversations, but really that unrestrictedness is what they most need. Number 4 is oftentimes it's the small grassroots organizations that are the best investments with philanthropic dollars. And so, and we saw this during COVID, they're quick, they're nimble, they can move, they're responsive, and a dollar goes a very long way in small, mid-sized organizations. And so they are deeply rooted in community and they have the trusting relationships that most of those that are most impacted. And investing in their capacity and sustainability of these small organizations can really have a big impact. And it kind of goes back to that number one, which is because they're small and they're grassroots, sometimes we have to find them. Sometimes we have to seek them out because they're often not seen, and they often don't have grant writers who can apply for funding. And so it requires more effort on our part to really do our due diligence about who's most connected in community. And I think the number 5th big consideration for us all is multi-year funding is really critical to the other 4 things that I just talked about. Organizations that are on the front line, particularly in our marginalized communities and communities of color, really need the long-term commitment. You know, they're trying to remove barriers and deconstruct the systems that have been in place for a long time. And their capacity to do this work, they have to plan, and multi-year funding provides that sustainability in the runway for them to do their planning and ultimately grow their capacity to have more impact, which is what we all need them to do. So while there are more that we could share, these are just some really great things to start for consideration. I hope you'll contemplate on these and think about them like a checklist, I guess. So you can think about this along your journey, and know that ECCF is here to support you. You can always pick up the phone, call, pick our brain, ask he or she, hey, what's going on with the struggles or successes of the grant making that you're doing, or ask us for ideas of organizations that we're supporting that you may want to co-fund in a similar way in your community.